Pumpkin King art, fan art, and prop replicas. John Wick 1970 Chevelle Super Sport In-Depth Model Review Part 2. Alright, as I'm waiting on some of this stuff to dry, and it's seeming though that I need to use double coats with this silver, although it does go on pretty good. I always highly recommend, if you're going to paint something silver or gold, make sure that you put down a black layer first. And then if I was going to paint something gold, I'd paint it black, paint it silver, then paint it gold. Alright, so our next step is to put these wheels together. So something else I'm going to do is paint shocks. So I'm going to use this some people call it yellow, some people call it green. But I'm just going to take and try and paint it with a toothpick. These are kind of small, and I think if So here's the part where you have to make decisions. So a lot of people are making decisions just to go ahead and leave this black, and that's totally fine. What you would have to do is, in one of the next steps when you start getting the cab put together, you just have to take your floor polish and coat the seats and anything else that's going to be vinyl or leather in the vehicle with it. But I'm going to do something a little different, because in the Chevelle, sometimes they do the interior black, sometimes they do the interior as the same color as outside the vehicle. I'm going to do the same color as the outside the vehicle. So I have made things a little easier. I'm pretty good at mixing up paint, but happened to be at the store and they had another hunter green in full cart, so I'm going to go with that. Alright, so I've been going in and using the Sharpies and detailing stuff. I have been detailing the dash, been detailing the seats and parts, and then have been detailing the inside here. Alright, so I get tired of people on YouTube not showing that they make mistakes. Or not saying they make mistakes. They come out with these just beautiful, perfect things, and that's not necessarily true. I made some mistakes in doing this. I got the marker in some places I didn't want to. So what I did is I corrected it. So I took a toothpick and I sharpened it with an X-Acto knife, made a really fine point on it, and then I dipped it down a little bit of black and touched up where the black was, dipped it in a little bit of green, touched up where the green was, because I do make mistakes. That happens. Sometimes you have to fix it. But others act like they make no mistakes, and I want you to know that it's okay. You do make mistakes. Even the best do. They just don't show theirs. They like to cut it out. I would have showed it, but I was doing this part off camera. So I had to look at it really, really close to get this kind of detail. And there's no way I could get the camera in between my face and what was going on. Alright, so I've got that part done, and here's the next part with the inside of the car. So there's a reason why we used craft paint on the inside of the car and had primed it. So you want to use a matte color paint on the inside. And I also learned by doing some research, most of the cars that were actually used in John Wick, they actually did have a green interior. So the reason why we do this is, you know how in the bottom of a car you've got carpet. So the matte does make it look like it's got carpet, which looks really good. And in order to get that very realistic vinyl look, when you take that floor polish over top of that matte, it looks identical to vinyl. It doesn't have that gloss sheen. It looks like vinyl. That's the reason why you don't want to use gloss paint, because it just does not look as good. So the matte craft paint is how you want to go about this. Alright, so now I'm going to have to switch back to that. So here is my completely clean brush, because you do not want anything in it or it'll come out with the floor polish. And I need to find my floor polish. Where did I put it? Okay, so I have my floor polish. Now remember, the only part you're going to paint now is the parts that would be vinyl or leather. So I think I'm going to start out with this part here, and I am not going to want to paint the floorboard at all. I'm only going to want to paint the stuff that is vinyl or leather. So we want to lightly go on these walls here. Also be mindful of the detail of work you've done if you've done it with the marker. If you get this stuff where the markers was, it's going to take that right back off. So I want to just go barely around it. And you also want to do it quite lightly in the layers, because you do not want to get any of this down in your floorboard, because you want your floorboard to look just like carpet. now I'm going to get started on some of the decaling. Something you're probably going to want is microset and microsolve. So microset you use to set the decals, microsolvent you use to make them go ahead and kind of, I don't know, almost like melt to the surface itself. Alright, so going to get started, I guess, with the hood here, and then move on to other stuff. I was fixing to work on the dash, but I had to do some more paint work on the dash. I missed a spot with the floor cleaner. So you want some lukewarm water to put your decals in, and you want to use some microset on the surface of where you're going to put the decal, and then you want to probably do that a couple of times, and then you want to allow it some time to dry, then put the micro solvent on top of the decal. I don't want to do one layer of that one. So I kind of changed my mind on the springs. I ended up painting them a little bit with some Testors Yellow. And my Testors paint was a little old, so it didn't do too good. But now I'm fixing to install the springs. Alright, so I'm going to teach you about a little bit of a trick here. I've already done this once, but I'm going to go back and do it a second time to make sure I get all of it. So this piece comes completely the silver color here, or chrome color, and that doesn't look good on the grill part. So what you want to do is, you can see it's starting to look better now, is you want to get some black in the recesses, but you don't want it on the outside, because you do want the outside to shine. So what you do is you get you a brush, and then you get you a little bit of black paint on the brush, and then you go back and dip it in the water like you're going to clean it. Get a lot of the black out of it. Now it's kind of just got a little bit of the paint and water, and what you do is you kind of just drip it over, just touch it to the recesses, and then that way that little bit of paint that's in it will sink into the recesses, and the rest will evaporate off the other part. I'll do that again, get a little bit more. So what you're doing is you're puddling it into the recesses that way. Gets where you want it to be, and stays off of where you don't. Got a little too much paint on it that time. Just add some water to dissipate it. It starts puddling a little too much, use your brush to get rid of the excess. Alright, so now I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to make the glass parts look better. So what I have here is super glossy Mod Podge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a toothpick and put a little bit of it down in places where I want the glass to be. So over top of the decals for the like the turn signals and the gauges on the dash, I'm going to put some of this super glossy Mod Podge down. let's start talking about the kind of glue you want to use on clear parts or near clear parts. So you do not want to use the regular Testors glue or any type of super glue. Something you're going to want to use near these parts and on these parts is something like some type of Canopy glue or something like Micro Crystal Clear. You do not want to use those kinds of the other kinds of glues like Testors or super glue because it will cause your clear parts to fog. Even after, say, you are trying to glue other parts, you don't want to glue other parts around these either. So you want to do one of your last steps should be gluing the clear parts on, so you don't end up getting those fogged up. Alright, so we'll see how these go in. Alright, here we are at the end here. I did do some stuff off camera. I did go ahead and put the thing together and glue it together. I did have to actually kind of refit and reglue some stuff several times to get it to fit together correctly. This is an older kit that they have repopped for the John Wick stuff. So a lot of the stuff in this mold I'm pretty sure is around a little over 50 years old. So a lot of this doesn't fit exactly a lot like new kits do perfectly together. It has a lot of flash to it, but still overall a good, beautiful kit. So some things I would have done differently, going back at this, is that I probably would have waited to try to glue the cab to the frame. I'd wait till I started trying to assemble the body over top of it. And then I would have not put a single drop of floor polish on the body until I had gotten all the decals on, because the some of the decal solution, the one you use to the solvent, the one you use to kind of melt the decals to whatever you're putting on, kind of had a bit of a reaction with the floor polish, and I had to go back and redo the floor polish in some places because it ended up making it look milky and taking part of it off. So I'd have to go back and redo that. But everything else done really well. Like the super glossy Mod Podge really did make it look like there's glass in the dash. Done pretty good on covering some of the turn signals and things like that. And I think going back to this, I would have just used some orange and red clear on the turn signals. Might would have looked better. But overall, it was pretty good. Please like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and DeviantArt. Have a blessed day.